Drums of War, Chapter 13, The Fall of New Montreal. On the steps of the Planetary Assembly of New Montreal, Emily LaPointe was nervous but confident. Surely reason would win the day, as it had won the vote. He had argued fiercely against the Jingoist Republic sympathizers and their obvious disregard for the bitter costs of war. The Republic has a hammer, and that makes problems look awful nail-like. As terrible as these Exarch have been, they must still have been able to see reason. After all, his own people had managed it. Barely. By a margin of less than 1/100%, in fact. In just a few minutes, the Acolyte Lord would land, and Emily would fulfill his duty as the temporary elect representative of New Montreal, and symbolically turn over his ceremonial sword so negotiations can begin. It would be a massive step in the right direction towards peace, towards optimism. The Republic and their sympathizers would take a dim view of the Xenos if they wished, and for the outset it certainly appeared justified to do so. But Emily knew that peace was always a better choice. Killing people is never the best choice, and he's an analyst of war started and ended with the simple fact that in war people are obliged to kill each other. With him were some religious leaders, the cardinal from the Catholics, a few Protestant ministers, 2 imams who disagreed with each other more than anyone else, assorted rabbis and an ordinance priest, and some leaders from the small Sikh and Buddhist communities who were there to witness the event, and without exception completely opposed the surrender. Emily suspected that they had hoped to sabotage the negotiations to force New Montreal into a fight. More welcome were the collection of mayors and provincial governors, whose positions were mostly ceremonial in the first place, who were there to add to the pomp. "This is going to end poorly," said the Cardinal as the aggressively angled shuttle came into view. "Some of us don't harbor superstitious hatred for the other," Emily shot back. One of the imams narrowed his eyes and said, "We remember the we sing." "I have not forgotten. I'm confident that I can negotiate reparations and an apology for that incident," Emily rejoined, brimming with confidence. "And what reparations can there be? Shall we accept the insincere words of apology from the genocidal? Shall that bring back the honor guard? Shall it bring back the Star Sailors who crewed the we sing?" the other imam asked pointedly. "May God forgive you, Emily. May God forgive you for your arrogance, your thwarting of justice, for what is about to befall our beautiful planet." Her minister stared coldly as the shuttle began to circle for landing. "I do not need forgiveness. I am doing what's right." The shuttle landed. Its passenger bay doors slid open, and 24 soldiers filed out, each in a line leading from the shuttle to Emily and his delegation. Then a scarlet-skinned man, dressed in elaborate robes, stepped out with 2 attendants on either side. His mouth tightened and eyes narrowed when Emily met his gaze. The man strode up to the delegation in silence, and Emily presented the sword. He snatched it from Emily's hand and struck him in the face, leaving a long gash from the bony protrusions from his knuckles on Emily's face. "You dare look at me in the face with such unworthy eyes, coward!" Emily was more than a little shocked. "Of course. How are we meant to negotiate?" Again the man struck Emily and roared, "Negotiate? You have surrendered without even a fight. You and everything you speak for now belongs to me, unworthy one. There will be no negotiations. There will be no negotiations. There will be only obedience for those worth more than sating the thirst of Exer. May the stars tremble at his steps." The religious leaders shared a look and nodded to each other. Then the cardinal raised up his staff and smote the invader across his face, shouting, "Get behind me, servant of Satan." He was, of course, gunned down immediately, and his companion soon fell likewise in a vain unarmed charge. Emily was blinded by tears as the soldiers closed in. He began to think that perhaps he'd been naive. In the backwoods of New Montreal, George Topham gave precisely 0 fucks about how the referendum had gone. He'd actually seen what fanatic death cultists were like during his service in the CIP anti-piracy patrols. And if the Exarch weren't fanatic death cultists, he would eat his boots. The simple fact was that there were people out there who had no interest in talking, and they weren't limited to other humans. George harbored the notion that since crossing the Glass Gulf and meeting the Friendlies, people had gotten overly optimistic about Xenos. They'd forgotten about the ants, but worse, and the horribly babel-eater tentacle things, and even the Wixians, who might not ever attempt spaceflight again. Now that they've been struck too by the Republic. But one dude made friends with blue people, and suddenly the universe isn't actively trying to murder humanity and their companions. That's not how things work. Humanity had just caught a break for once. That was why he and his hunting buddies had gotten together in a cabin and were watching the Lord Priest, or whatever, accept the surrender of the planet. Well, the spineless could bend over if they wanted, but he and his buddies had families to protect, and they had a plan. None of them were surprised when the Xena hit the surrendering idiot, but they were pleasantly surprised that the religious leaders died defiant. To hell with the vote. That Lord guy was going to have a nice scar across his forehead from the Cardinal's staff, so that was pretty neat. So it turns out the Republic was right, huh? His buddy Josh said. Oh yeah, turns out that they weren't full of shit again, just like the last time they were right, another buddy, Ned answered. And the time before that, George said darkly. You hear back from your pilot buddies yet? Yeah, Josh said. I had a lot of volunteers. It's just getting the shuttles that's the problem. Blood for time, huh? Ned asked. Blood for time, I'm sorry to say. Ours or theirs? Theirs first. George racked his hunting rifle and strode for the door. They'll pay for every last centimeter of this mountain. 2 weeks later, George was stitching up his own leg. He winced at the pain with each time he pushed the needle through his skin. He had to keep on. He had to keep going. They just needed one more day to get enough shuttles. Just one more day. Billy, Kevin, Pierre, Jacques, Thomas. He muttered to himself. The sting of the names lessened the pain of the knife wound. The sting of the names could keep him moving forward. Just one more day. Just one more day, Josh said, as Ned put a cool cloth on his forehead. I can keep fighting for one more day. You're evacuating with the families, Ned told him sternly. You gave enough. I can still shoot. I don't need to run. Just park me by a window, and I'll keep shooting and shooting and shooting. You two can pick them off as they come into the open from the blinds. You're going, Ned repeated. The wives and kids will need one of us. I can still fight, he insisted. George banished the tears and tied off his suture. We'll fight them, Ned, he croaked. Fuck you. My cousin is fucking going. Ned, would you let him stop you? Fuck, Ned shouted, and George didn't bother pressing the issue. Josh was going to fight, and the three of them were all who were left. The three of them had to be enough for one more day. It'll be worth it, George said. The kids will make it, and Sally, Mary, Nancy, and Iris will take care of them and each other. They'll make it out. On the bridge of an Exarch battleship, Acolyte Lord Tukulzi Namirza reveled in his victory. The pathetic cowards of this planet, which he would name after himself, had surrendered at the mere sight of his three mighty ships. True, there were some pockets of resistance, but overall, the cleansing was going well. The people of this planet were so backward that they actually allowed their old and infirm to consume resources, rather than putting them to the final use of sating the thirst of Exur. May the stars tremble at his step. Their youth had strong bodies, and it had been shown that their race could have strong wills, so some of them might even be worthy of serfdom. Perhaps the children of these resistance fighters. Surely, these had inherited the worth of their forebearers. He had less hope for the worth of the rest of the people of this planet, however, as thousands of them had meekly accepted their fate, which wasn't exactly terrible, but it denied him the pleasure of putting them in their place, which was, of course, a dire insult. Today, though, he was going to crush the resistance pocket. These forest dwellers were indeed skilled hunters, and had wiped out every group sent to deal with them. So it had been assumed that there were at least 100 of these marksmen resisting them. There had been 7 fighters. The interrogators managed to squeeze that one from one that they took alive before he bit off his own tongue and choked to death. A worthy foe, even in defeat. Nothing is more pleasurable than crushing the worthy and putting the worth of their progeny to proper use. Acolyte Lord Tukulzi Namirza watched the formation of 200 warriors marching into the snow-covered canyon through their commander's helmet camera with pride. There was a bet amongst the initiate highborn about how many warriors the 3 resistance fighters would be able to kill before they were crushed. Yet these warriors were not going to lose a single man. Acolyte Lord Tukulzi Namirza just knew that as formidable hunters these humans might be, they would stand no chance against his personal guard. He was too shocked to be angry when the first of them fell to the primitive slug-throwing weapon. He had heard that these fighters in particular were deadly accurate, but to put a slug through the minuscule gap between the helmet and shoulder guards was a feat he believed impossible. The fact that these fighters were using recreational hunting weapons rather than military equipment made him wonder just what kind of creatures they hunted for recreation. "It is truly a shame that they will all die," he said aloud. "They had the misfortune of not being born under your rule, Acolyte Lord," the security chief answered. "Pity them their births," said the communications officer. "Pity not their deaths, for they bring glory to our warriors." Eventually, the warriors came upon a cabin, and one of the fighters shot from the window, seeing a foe for the first time. 10 of them charged for the cabin. They all fell to the ground, clutching their legs and knees. Those of them who didn't have their limbs torn asunder by slugs. Acolyte Lord Tukulzi Nanurza was impressed by the trap, but his warriors were less so. They elected to use the incendiary on the cabin and waited for the fighter to expose himself. As the building burned, the human simply held his position and killed 4 more warriors before his gun went silent. In the distance, an atmosphere-capable yacht rose from the mountainside, along with a dozen shuttlecraft. "Where did these craft launch from?" he demanded. "Acolyte Lord, they do launch from the other side of the planet to us." "Set a course to intercept. I see now their plan. They send our serfs to flee while they fight. This only raises the worth of these serfs." "I obey, Acolyte Lord," his helmsman said. "Acolyte Lord," his census officer said. "The passenger craft and the shuttles do separate. Pursue the larger craft." "Acolyte Lord." "The shuttles do come towards us." "For what purpose?" "Unknown, Acolyte Lord." While the bridge crew began debating the possibilities, the shuttlecraft came closer and closer, and Acolyte Lord Tukulzi Nanurza commanded, "Pay them no mind!" Then the shuttlecraft began to swarm the battleship and opened up with their meager weapons. Meager, in comparison to what the other Acolyte Lords had reported, yet substantial enough to force the shields to be raised, and the battleship to slow enough to take aim at the small craft. "It was never their plan to die," his navigation officer muttered in unrestrained awe. "We will not be able to close the distance before they slip into hyperspace." "There are other children of worth," Acolyte Lord Tukulzi Nanurza said confidently, "and even these will eventually be retaken. Let another revel in that glory." In the meanwhile, Acolyte Lord Tukulzi Nanurza took immense pleasure each and every time his gunners destroyed one of the shuttlecraft. End of chapter. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.